Are we live? I don't see us. Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Revolutionary Health, a program of the Counter Narrative Project. I'm Charles Stevens, the executive director, and I'm joined with.
David Malebranche, how are y'all?
Should I call you like David or
Yeah,
Dr. David? Is it Dr. Mel
you can do
Branch or
anything you
Dr.
want to.
David?
It gets too wordy sometimes, so David or Dr. David is just fine.
Dr. David. Okay. Welcome. As always, please jump in the comments if you have any questions related to health. We like to have an interactive discussion, but I thought we'd start with something in the news, right? With
Right.
Grindr. So as I understand it, Grindr, the app will create an app. I guess create a way for you to get reminders
Yes.
about your HIV testing, so it'll remind you.
Yeah, and this isn't anything new to Grindr. Like Grindr has done a lot of sexual health promotion. With kind of like Ask the HIV Doc, Kaiser Family Foundation has worked with them, and they've done some videos,
Huh.
and they put some ads in about PrEP and Ask the HIV Doc in the past. So, but this is, I think, the first time they've kind of advertised for doing HIV
Like
testing. And
reminders.
yeah, and I guess what they're going to kind of do is put it every 6 to 12 months to kind of give people
Wow.
reminders. So, in fact, it can, probably remind people like once or twice a year to get their test.
What do y'all think about that? Please in the comments let us know your thoughts about
What
Grindr.
are your thoughts about it?
What are my thoughts?
Yeah.
Please, you go first.
I'll go first. So I do think it's a good idea. I do think it's an interesting extension because back in the day, and I mean people still do this, but a lot of nightclubs will go, like community-based organizations traditionally would go to nightclubs and we'd set up tables and we'd have condoms and we'd do HIV testing. And even now people do a lot of mobile HIV testing at the vans outside the nightclubs and bars and stuff like that. And what I hear from a lot of community members, especially a lot of black gay men that go to these bars, is like, when I'm going to get my groove on, when I'm going to hang out, I'm going to party, I don't feel like getting an HIV test. And there are a lot of horror stories where someone went to go out to have a good time with some friends, and then they get the test and they test positive, and it kind of ruins the whole night. And so a lot of people don't want to do that. And so I'm wondering how this is going to translate to something like Grindr, where people are basically going to hook up. You're going to get a nut, and all of a sudden you see this HIV testing ad. Is that actually going to invoke you to go ahead and get HIV testing? And I think it's hard to prove that at the end of the day. Like you can't prove just because they started this initiative, because there's so many other initiatives encouraging HIV testing. How are you going to prove that this actually did that?
Yes.
I think it's a great idea, though. I think it's something that we need to do. I do want to push back a little bit because Grindr is predominantly used by white gay men. And so I would actually probably say if we're going to do something and target a lot of black gay men, it probably should be on Jacked.
I wonder what the demographics are.
So
of
let me tell you about that
Grindr.
because I was just in Miami last weekend. There was this
Okay.
brilliant young brother named David Williams who was doing actually his very first presentation on
Nice.
PrEP. And what he did was he compared the logistics and the demographics of who uses Grindr and who uses Jack. And he said that it's kind of like a reverse thing where Grindr is, I think, close to 80% white and Jack is about 80% black. So his whole thing was,
but it also depends on where you live at too. I imagine.
Yeah,
So I wonder if in certain locales,
maybe it depends on that. But I think his point was, if we want to use Jack, and why are all the people on Grindr like have all these different kind of special.
And don't forget about Adam for Adam and Growler.
Adam for Adam and Growler. Yeah, those things are all there too. But I think
like Coke and Pepsi.
Oh yeah,
like a lot of options.
It's not like McDonald's and Burger King,
it's
right? And Scrubs too as well. Yeah, so I mean, all these things can reach, but I do think it's a good initiative. So I think it'll encourage more of us, and I would think that some of us who work with community-based organizations, who work in organizations, who maybe do independent, not even research, but just community level interventions, that we can partner with these groups and kind of, we could buy ad space. We can put a message that we want to put across because people are using these apps.
People are using them.
Yeah.
I want to say hello to Monty. Hey, Monty, I see you watching. Hey, Anthony McWilliams, I see you in here as well. But do you feel like it will have an impact on testing though? Like Grindr does these reminders. And by the way, from what I understand, it's like the reminders are actually optional, so you can go into the settings and turn it off if you don't want to get reminders about testing.
Yeah, and
I think it's really gonna move the needle.
Well, it depends. I think it's a hard thing to prove. Like you can't, if you put up a billboard on a highway says get HIV tested.
Yeah.
How you gonna prove at the end of the day that actually resulted in so and so many HIV tests? You can't prove that. So at the end of the day, you're just throwing it out there to say a lot of people use this. We'll throw it out there, see if they see it. It may have an impact, it may not, but I don't think there's a way they can measure it unless they were to survey users and users took the time to take a survey and then said, oh, hey, you know, I did get HIV tested as a result of seeing this ad or not.
See, my thing is, and I was talking about this earlier, like I feel like, do we rely too much on technology to take the place of human connection? I mean, yes, I guess, okay, so the app reminds you to get
Right,
tested, but what
right,
about your friends? Like, what
right,
about people that care about you and love you?
right.
Like, are we trying to substitute human relationships with technology? And is that going to make us less have less empathy? Is it going to make us
Right.
lazier in our friendships? Like, I feel like, yeah,
Maybe.
it's one thing to get like an alarm saying, okay,
Right.
you're due for a test, but I still believe that if you have people in your life that care about you that actually reach out and say, have you gotten tested? And I was like talking about that on Facebook, like how I don't have people in my life really discussing testing with me very much.
Mm-hmm.
Or even saying, Charles, and I haven't gotten a test in a year, actually.
Right.
It's been about 12 months, but
Right.
I've been like, but yeah, I haven't.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, I need to get a test. The last test I got was a home based test, actually.
Okay.
Um, from Walgreens,
Mm-hmm.
plug. And, it was fine. But yeah, I still think that it's important for us as Black gay men to really have that conversation. Like, and it doesn't have to be judgmental. It doesn't have to be, like a sort of, it doesn't have to be shady. It could just be from a place, it could be a discussion.
Absolutely. And I don't think it has to be either or. So, like, instead of a reminder, you can put something on there where it's actually a more human message, where someone's actually talking to you. Like, hey, I see you on this, and the other, think about it, check with your friends, check with yourself. Have you been HIV tested? And so instead of just a click reminder that pops up automatically, that's driven by you signing in on the app, you actually have a human being video recorded saying some things that will remind you to do that. So then you kind of have it. Of course, that's not going to take the place of a friend or someone who's close to you who reminds you. And, a lot of research has shown that it's usually peer norms that encourage us to get tested. So if your friends are getting tested, then you're going to get tested if you're HIV negative. If you're HIV positive, if your friends are on meds and getting follow up, that's going to determine what you do. So it does depend on your social circles in that respect.
Have you ever gone with a friend to get tested?
I have in the past, yeah, and I've had friends come with me to get tested in the past.
That's
too.
awesome.
Yeah, so
I never talk about this, but one of my best HIV testing experiences when I was getting a test was actually at a local CBO here in Atlanta. It was at NASUM.
Mm-hmm. Shout out to NASUM.
Shout out to NASUM. Yeah, this was many, many years ago. So, I think I was in college still. And it was back when they were on MLK.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they were further up MLK on like Westlake. I think they're still on MLK.
Right.
And I made the appointment. This is like back when it took a week to get the results. And I'm totally aging myself, but it's fine. We're dating myself. But yeah, like it was just such an amazing experience where during the post-test counseling, I hate that I forgot his name. Now this is like, again, back when I was in college, it was like maybe 2002 or something.
Right.
But he was such an amazing counselor. Like it was one of the best experiences. He had great empathy. And mind you, this is also before there was like a intervention or curriculum around how to do a test. And it was probably one of the best testing experiences I've had because someone cared and there's caring, but he really, really just took an interest, which contrasted so much from the first time I had gotten an HIV test when I was like 15 or something. I was like 16, I think.
Right.
And I went to what was the Atlanta Gay and Lesbian Center, and it was like they just gave me the result. It was like, all right, see ya, essentially.
Right.
So I've had a lot of different experiences, but in terms of the reminder piece to bring it back around, I think it's fine. I think we're in an age now where we get appointment reminders, and tech is just such an important. It's so integrated. Artificial intelligence is so integrated into our lives. But my concern is always, is that taking the place of just concern? Oh, I see Anthony waving.
Right.
Who someone else just joined us. Yakeem, I'm sorry if I'm not pronouncing your name right. Thanks for joining us. So again, talk to us about your testing experiences. Would you set if you're on Grindr or Jacked or Adam for Adam or Growler or Scruffed or whatever you're on, if they had an application where you could get reminders for testing, is it something that you would do? Or, is it something you encourage your friends to do? To get
people do reminders on their phones to take their meds, whether it be blood pressure, HIV, diabetes, whatever like that. So it may just be a logical extension of it at the end of the day.
Yeah, I don't know. I still kind of wonder if people just want to go on if apps, if Is there ways that we can integrate sexual health into apps where it's not like too much?
So robotic.
Yeah.
I doubt that. But I mean, I think there's going to be a happy median. I think there's going to be a breaking point where we get too technologically advanced, and eventually we're going to have to circle back to these kind of human connectedness pieces.
Or the computers could just take over the
They
machines.
could.
Like
it could be Terminator
2,
2. Right, exactly.
I mean, I know about Terminator. Linda Hamilton warned us. Sarah Connor.
She told us it was coming. Have you ever seen the movie Ex Machina?
Oh, I did. That was so good.
Yeah. Where they actually took that over. She actually got smarter than all of them.
She liberated herself.
It was
like,
good,
fuck that.
Yeah, Ex Machina is a great movie.
That movie, and it's also in Her. Did you see that?
Yes,
one?
Her was great too.
Yeah,
I thought
like
of that
all
one
those,
too.
It's so and it's I think that's definitely the direction.
I think in the future it's going
to
be
eventually Siri and who's the other one?
Alexa.
They're gonna be like, Charles, get tested, and all that. Is that what we're moving
toward? Charles, get out. Right. We're taking over.
I would be so triggered by that.
Right.
I don't. There's something very Eurocentric about that.
I know. Get out, please. Right.
Hey, Walter. Walter joined. I mean, are there other ways that I don't know? Like, so what is the role of apps then in sexual health? Like, do you have thoughts about like what should be the role?
Yeah, I think it's a good option, just like anything else. So I think there are certain people that will use apps more. There's certain people that are going to use apps less. So to me, if you like using apps, it's a good option to use. I don't think it should necessarily take the place of kind of the human connectedness of doing something else, of the human reminders of like circling yourself with friends who will remind you or be encouraged to talk about your sexual health, or you keeping up on getting HIV tested, or if you're positive, taking your medications. Yeah. Like, I think you do need to have those reminders. There's a way to have both. Some people like the impersonal part of it. They don't want to be bothered by the human beings. Other people, I'm serious. And so some people
but then you go down to the doctor's office and then you're mad when the people don't have good.
I mean, it's what it is. But I think at the end of the day, you give people options. They're going to exercise the options they use. I don't think there's a right way or a wrong way about it.
I don't know. I mean, I do like self-checkout at some of the grocery stores. So I
understand.
Sometimes with it.
There's a place for technology.
There is a place.
All right.
I wanted to ask you about something. I wanted to ask you about. I mean, okay. So I think my other issue is I'm always amazed at how the messaging, even on the apps and stuff, the advertising seems so different in the conversations that I hear Black gay men having. Like, I feel like there's always such a distance between the messaging that you hear. Even promoting sexual health, it just always sounds so different in the conversations. Yeah. And so and of course, I don't know if they focus group this messaging to death or whatever, but I'm just like, how do we ensure that the messaging, even that we might receive on Grindr, on Jack or Adam, and all these places, that it just feels more authentic, that it feels more realistic about, like, so that the sexual health education that we're getting speaks to our sexuality, our sexual experiences. Right. Like, I think there's such a gulf, and how do we bridge that?
Yeah, and one of the things that's interesting, I was given a presentation.
Hey, Marcus Stanley,
outside of Springfield, Missouri, the other day, and we were talking about some of the advertising. I don't know if you remember this, but back in the day, the Philadelphia Department of Health actually had an advertising for HIV testing that was a brother kind of looking down, and it's kind of like, what do you say when you look through a rifle and you kind of see that?
Oh my God.
Where the target is on it. And it said, have you been hit? It says, if not, take the test, something, something, something. And I remember when it came out in Philly, this is about 5 or 6 years ago, there was a huge uproar about it because, oh my God. I mean, it put like a Black man's face in the crossfire, and it was just awful. And I remember when
Johnny, what's up with Philly?
The community pushed
what's
back.
What's up with Philly, Johnny?
But it was a marketing campaign from a private industry that consulted with the Department of Health, and they supposedly got focus groups of Black gay men to approve this ad, and the Black gay men approved it, and I just didn't believe that at the end of the day, and I thought it was crazy.
But I mean, it's like,
but that was like 6 years ago. My point was that there's actually, I looked at the UK, and the UK has a wonderful HIV testing campaign now, where they actually have two brothers laying in bed, and it says me, period, him, period, us. And it's about getting tested because it's good for both of us. So it keeps both of us informed. And the two brothers are kind of just sitting there laying in bed chilling. And it's really a nice, romantic, kind of loving piece. And I just think those kind of messages are a lot better received.
Mm-hmm.
And you could tell it came from a black man in the UK, a black gay man in the UK,
Mm-hmm.
who came up with that rather than someone who was just sitting in a boardroom who was not black, who was steeped in anti-blackness and white supremacy, and decided to say, "Oh, we're going to get this out, and this is going to look good." If
But
we
have you
actually,
ever? But have you actually ever been in a focus group though? Like I've been in focus groups and with black gay men, and I don't know if it's something about the masks that we wear or the performance of respectability politics,
Mhm.
but even the conversations that we have in focus groups just sometimes feels very different than how we talk.
inauthentic.
It yeah, and again, I don't know if it's that when we see a white person waving a gift card at us or something, we feel like we have to. I mean, no, there is this culture
Right,
sometimes of
right.
like where we're paid for our pathology, we're paid for our pain, and I don't know if it's that we're so used to doing that we feel like
Doing that performance,
and I'm sitting and I'm usually when I'm sitting up there like I'm always the like the contrarian because I'm just like no.
Why are we doing this? Right. Yeah, I think there's other ways to do it. So I think it's got to come from us. The messaging has to come from us.
Well, Trina Scott saying, "Hey, beloveds." Anthony Antoine says, "I may be the odd man out. I'm sure, no surprise. But outside of professional life, I've taken many friends for HIV testing. We should normalize that experience amongst us, and if we can talk so explicitly about our sexual activities amongst my friends, we must hold each other accountable for testing and treatment." Amen. Thank you, Anthony.
Thanks,
That's so
Anthony.
beautiful.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if HIV. I don't know if HIV testing is ever going to be normalized. Because I mean,
well, those are
should it be?
those are the words in the articles. Like when they interview,
Mhm.
and most of them were gay white men that they interviewed who are physicians, were saying that, well, this normalizes the process because it's on Grindr. And I was like, well, it's not really normalizing
What does it
the
mean to
process.
normalize?
I don't
Yeah.
understand what that means either.
Yeah.
But I also think that we can't do this dance where we consider just because people with HIV are living longer lives and there's medications that work and we can treat it. They say, oh, it's just like every other chronic disease. And I was like, that's bullshit. It's not like every other chronic disease. Someone gets breast cancer, they get an immediate sympathy card. Someone gets colon cancer, immediate sympathy card. Even heart attacks, you get an immediate sympathy card. Someone gets HIV and people are looking at folks saying, well, what did you do to deserve that? Or were you sleeping with a lot of people? Or why didn't you wear condoms? You should have known better.
Absolutely.
And so while the parallel can be made that it's a chronic disease that can be managed over time, like these other chronic diseases, the stigma, societal and otherwise, is drastically different. So I think we have to keep that in mind as we try to quote unquote normalize HIV. I don't think it's going to be normal. It's almost like saying when
Like
people, I don't see color. And so when people say like, oh, I'm not racist, I don't see color. And I was like, I want you to see color. Like you should see color.
Absolutely.
You shouldn't let it dictate how you treat other people. But if you can't see color, you must be fucking blind. Like what's going on?
Why is it always like the black guy that only dates white men?
This says that. I don't see color except for when it's
a
white guy
coming
coming
at me. It's no shade though. It's
right.
no shade.
Right. Which means shade.
No, it's not.
Which means complete shade.
I'm just making an observation.
Right.
And I don't mean that in a judgmental way. But you know what I thought you was gonna go?
Where?
Do you remember that ad back in the day from San Francisco? Don't be a bitch. Use a condom. Did you ever see that?
I never saw that.
There was an ad that I think it was in San Francisco, and it was a picture of this black man, like in urban gear, and it was like, "Don't be a bitch. Wear a condom." And I was like, "This is the craziest thing I've ever seen."
It's funny. I went to a conference a couple weeks ago in Miami with the ATC. Shout out to Sean McIntosh if he's out there. Did a wonderful job. There was some amazing energy with the Miami ATC in Fort Myers, and they weren't close to Miami or Tampa. They were kind of like right in the middle, but some really amazing warriors doing HIV and sexual health work over there. Mm-hmm. And there were these two women, both of whom were white women, had been living with HIV, I want to say each of them for about 30 years, told their stories, and we're talking about how words matter. Mm-hmm. And so they're showing some of these ads, and there was one ad that had a young black girl, and it said, from her, she got her eyes from her father, she got her HIV from her mother.
Yikes.
And that was like back in the day, like in the 80s, and it was just crazy. And so they were talking about how words matter when we say things like HIV infected versus HIV positive or living with HIV. When you say things like we talk about mistrust versus distrust, perceived versus experience, and how words actually matter when you're talking about health, context, race, sexuality, gender orientation.
How real
like
is
they
it?
Really matter.
But for so many of us, especially as black gay men, before we even come to a place of accepting our sexual identity or coming to a healthy space around identity development, we're faced with HIV stigma very often. Like it's almost like before we even fall in love and before we have the experience of sexuality, we're afraid of our sexuality because so much of it's been rooted in fear-based.
Yeah, when I was coming up, it was the first thing I remember working my summer after my freshman year in college, working at a a hospital in a custodial crew, and they were like, "Be careful with how you're washing things and how you're cleaning patients' rooms." And they listed over the 4 H's. They were like homosexuals, Haitians, heroin addicts, and hemophiliacs. And I was like, "Well, damn, I'm Haitian. I'm a first generation Haitian and I'm homosexual. Like, what's going on?" Like, sure. And the association was like, "You will have it because of this." So, yeah, it was really interesting back then. So, like, my whole section, and this was when I was like 17, 18 years old. So, my whole,
it's like 80,
yeah, 87, 86, 87. So, like, my whole sexual upbringing, when I was starting to find out, like, I really was getting comfortable with liking men, was all about fear. And so, sex was always about fear. Yeah.
And I wonder, I mean, you can't talk about, and maybe that should be a part of sexual health education. Like, at what point do you decolonize yourself from the fear, from the guilt, and I think so many of us, I think there's a perception that once you become an activist, then you're all like, black men loving black men is revolutionary act, and you're all on that the fear just goes away, or the shame and the stigma. And I think very often we still carry it with us.
It doesn't. Yeah, and a lot of the sex messages we get from like public health spaces, even in social media spaces, are all about fear. And so we don't talk about sex as a pleasurable experience. We don't talk about sex as an affirming experience. We don't talk about sex outside of intercourse and kind of what other options. And I mean, we talked about this before on here, but like some of the other things that people do and how sex should be pleasurable. And I remember the CDC came out with some guidelines for medical providers about taking a sexual history, and they call them the 5 Ps. And not in one of those Ps is the word pleasure.
Oh, wow.
And so to me, I was like, why don't y'all step up your game and extend it to 6 Ps if you're going to do that? Because they were like, partners, protection.
What to be fair, David? I mean, kind of stuff. The sex radicals don't exactly go work at the CDC. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's
obviously.
And we love we love our
tea, no shade to the CDC.
But it's not. I mean, the people that's on the cutting edge, like of sexuality,
sexual progressiveness.
Yeah, right. I mean, because I think it's also hard to be in a bureaucracy, especially work for the government. But at the same time, there is a responsibility to not reproduce this horribly stigmatizing fear-based language.
Absolutely.
And I don't know, like, I know I always want to hold them accountable. You always tell me not to, because
you should hold them accountable. You always hold them accountable.
I'm tired of holding people accountable.
You have to. That's the way it has to be.
It's not good for my mental health.
Whatever. It's okay.
Anthony had a comment. Can you imagine the update? You've been on Jacked 22 hours this week. I think it's time for HIV. Yeah, I don't like stuff like that. I don't know. Well, I mean, I'm not on, but yeah, I don't know. But it'll be interesting to see if people like.
It'll be interesting to see if people respond to it. Yeah. Again, I don't think you can prove that someone gets HIV tested because they see a reminder on Jacked. I just, you can't.
Maybe, but it doesn't hurt. Maybe
it doesn't hurt, but you can't prove anything. But I think it's a good idea to kind of remind people about that. But I think it would be better to promote some kind of more humanistic sexual health messages rather than just, oh, you have to get an HIV test from there. So,
Anthony also says we have to remember that Black gay men from ATL are different than, say, Black gay men from Macon or Augusta. Traveling Georgia and conducting focus groups among Black gay men in different locations, I've met Black gay men who like those scare tactics type ads. But Anthony, we got to liberate them. Yeah. Like the people that say they like the scare tactics and they say that they work, we got to liberate them. We got to like bring back the drop squad and get in the van and like decolonize, break out the bell hooks and the Essex Hempfield.
Right.
Seriously, like I know that the power of internalizing, and I know people do say like, because I've been doing HIV work for like Jesus, however long.
As long as the rest of us,
And I mean, I've been in groups where they say, these sort of like Willie Lynch letter type things was like, you gotta scare them and nothing works but fear. And I'm like, no, baby, that's obviously.
Some people it does. Some people, I've heard a lot of people say that.
But I don't believe them. But the people that say it works for them, I don't really believe them.
Well, some people say, and it's not even the fear tactics from
that's
like
the people,
advertisements.
That's like the people that say, I'm glad that my mama beat me every day with extension cords. It made me a better person. No,
I don't know if it's exactly the same. Like I've heard people say that they work in a hospital, and when they saw patients that were coming in really sick from complications of AIDS, then that scared them. So not necessarily messaging, and those are two.
I think that's trauma, though.
It is trauma. It is trauma.
And I think with Black folks, there's this thing with Black people where, part of the logic of white supremacy is punishing Blackness. Right. It's like this culture loves to punish Black people.
Yep.
This perversion of white supremacy. And I think that because we're punished so much, I think that we absorb it. It's like we think we deserve to be punished.
Absolutely.
And I think when we absorb that into our sort of sexual consciousness, I mean, we wonder why there's such tremendous pain and these like very stigmatizing messages that continue to proliferate in 2018, even somewhere like Atlanta, where it makes absolutely no sense.
And even the reasons why we treat each other sometimes the way we do.
And even why we treat each other the way we do.
Yeah, it all becomes internalized. I don't know why we do that. Yeah, you're right.
David, I want to talk about something else. Another
I'll
topic.
make it brief.
Okay.
And so I know we don't have much time, but I wanted to actually tell a story.
Extend it a little bit.
Maybe a little bit, yeah. I had a good friend of mine, a close friend of mine that I really care about deeply, call me on Thursday and told me he had just gotten through with a workout a day or two before, and lives in New York. Went with a trainer, hadn't been a trainer for a long period of time, and really had an intense workout, and said he was sore and he was kind of lying in his bed and really felt sore. And then it snowed in New York, so he went out and shoveled, and did more shoveling after that. And then he called me on Thursday and we talked, and he said, I really can't move out of bed. Like, my muscles are so damn sore. I can't do anything. And then he mentioned to me, he said, oh, and when I went to the bathroom, what really scared me is I started to pee and it came out like really, really dark. Like a dark brown, almost blackish color. And when I heard that, I immediately knew what it was. And it's this condition called rhabdomyolysis.
Wait, say that one more time.
Rhabdomyolysis.
Rhabdomyolysis.
And so basically it's a breakdown of the muscle tissue into the bloodstream. So usually it happens when people are in the sun for a long period of time, sometimes marathon runners, or when I've seen it clinically, like the 4 or 5 times I've seen it both in personal friends and in the hospital, is when someone has not worked out for a little while and then they go to a trainer, they do a really intense workout. What it is that all this muscle tissue starts to break down, all the enzymes flood into your bloodstream, and then they go through your kidneys and they can cause acute kidney injury and even acute kidney failure, where you need to be on dialysis and your kidneys go into failure. So it's nothing to joke about. And so I told him, when he told me that his urine was really dark, I said, dude, get to the hospital immediately, because what you do, they just hook you up to an IV and they just give you fluids, IV fluids for like 4, 5, 6 days. Sometimes they keep people in the hospital. And so the lab value that we talk about here is what's called the creatinine kinase, or the CK. And it's a measurement of muscle breakdown tissue from skeletal muscle. And the normal value for any human being, if you just got it tested, is less than 250.
Okay.
And his value was 250,000.
Jeez.
So he was way, way over what it should be. And that's why his muscles were so sore. And he's gotten out and he's back at home and he's feeling fine now, which is a blessing. And I'm really happy he's doing well. But I think it was and I've seen this happen to a few people before, like friends of mine here, and also a student recently. His CK level, I think, was 80,000, but 250,000 is ridiculously high. And so I tell people out there, like, a lot of us are concerned about our bodies.
Yeah.
A lot of us concerned about muscles.
Absolutely.
A lot of us fall out of care, or we don't do exercising as much. And then we try to go back in. And even if we're a little bit older, even if we're younger, like in our 20s, we think we can just go back in and immediately start working out again. And what I try to tell people is that, sometimes when you work out too hard, it actually can be detrimental if you don't kind of ease your way back into it. And the lesson that I learned from like seeing these experiences, especially seeing what my friend went through recently, is that you should be sore after an intense workout, right? Whether you're doing weight training or you're running or you're doing, what do they call those? They're almost like cults, where you go and do all the gym
like
stuff.
CrossFit?
Like CrossFit, yeah, like right around that. They can be kind of cultish.
Although we're not stigmatizing the
no
CrossFit
judgment, no
community,
judgment, no saying. Right, okay.
CrossFitters.
But what I'm saying is that, when you get in that intense thing and you do, you can feel this peer pressure. Like, oh my God, all these people are really working out hard. They're doing all these push-ups. I got to push myself. And people will be like, push.
Yeah.
And when you go home, you think, oh, I should be sore.
Wow.
But the level of soreness, if it's something where you can't even get out of bed, or your muscles are just aching 3, 4, 5 days later, that's not normal. So go and get checked out. Because it's really something, when you think about it, if you do something like that, an intense workout, and then you go into kidney failure and have to be on dialysis, that's the rest of your natural born life. So to people watching and thinking about like going back into exercising or wanting to step out.
Summer's around the corner.
Yeah, you're trying to get your 6-pack abs. You're trying to get your back bigger, trying to do all this kind of other stuff. Like, just be careful when you go back into it. Try to take your time and like escalate up until you do some of these intense workouts. Don't go right from 0 to 60.
Amen. Thank you for that.
Yeah, so I just want to mention that.
If you're watching this on YouTube, please subscribe to us on YouTube. If you're watching this on Facebook, please make sure you like our Facebook page. And also, don't forget to join our email list at thecounternarrative.org. What else?
If you have any topics, things you want to hear about, anything else you want to talk about, let us know. Any ideas for the future? I know we're here Thursday night at 8:00. That was because all of us were gone.
Oh my God, we were traveling. It was Tuesday. We were all
night
in different places. I think I just got back yesterday. I got back today.
I got back this morning at 1:00 in the morning.
Where were you at?
And you got I was in Missouri. I was
You're
in
Missouri?
Springfield,
I
Missouri.
was, yeah, I just got back like this evening.
Johnny just got
Johnny
back
just got back
first thing this
yesterday.
morning, 1 a.m. like the same time.
It's been
So,
crazy.
but we're usually going to be here on Tuesday nights at 7.
You know, I got in my mind, I was like, maybe we could figure out how to do some kind of filming thing. And I was just like,
I like it live. I like it
I like the
live.
live too. Yeah. And folks are liking us. I see a few more comments. Thank you, Charles, David, and Counter Narrative. These live discussions is part of the work. Thank you, Anthony. I'll make sure I said hey to everybody. Yeah. So again, check us out Tuesdays at. I was thinking about 1 to 8.
Whatever time. We'll let you know.
What do y'all think about starting at 8? Let us know. We've been doing Tuesdays at 7, but we may push it back to 8.
Yeah. Whatever's gonna be easier for y'all.
Whatever's gonna be easier for y'all. All right. Are there any shout outs that we need to do? Some good shout outs to people.
Yeah, no, but I think shouting out the past couple of weeks I've been in Fort Myers, Florida, and with the Miami community, and I do want to shout out some of the amazing sisters that are doing work with the AIDS Training and Education Center.
I love them.
In Missouri.
Yeah.
Ashley, Tuesday, Beta, and Simone, who took care of me while I was out there. They drove me in a van 2 hours from Springfield to the place where I had to do my plenary speech. And they're absolutely phenomenal. And they had a whole conference on case managers, social workers who work in the HIV field.
That is incredible.
And the case managers, social workers, shout out to all of you out there who are doing amazing work, underpaid, overworked, and really kind of the heart and soul of a lot of our clinical services to people living with HIV. So thanks to all the sisters that were out there in Missouri that took care of me while I was there, and shout out to all the social workers and case managers who do the amazing work y'all do.
Yeah, I never did case management. I was an outreach worker though.
It's tough. It's tough.
It's really,
it's
the hours and caseloads. Absolutely.
Right.
You know, I'm just grateful for, of course, the Counter Narrative universe and just the amazing team that we have. And it's just been a really, incredible week. I was in a meeting in DC with some great folks myself.
Mm-hmm.
And we had shout out to Monty Wolf. We had a program. Was it Wednesday?
Tuesday.
Everything's a blur. Tuesday. What's it? Is today Thursday? I don't know what the day of the week is.
Thursday, right.
Apparently, my self-care isn't great.
Dude.
We had a program called Protections, Black Human and Vulnerability, and it was a really great night of storytelling and discussion and dialogue. And, as you know, such an important part of the Counter Narrative Project. I would say it's really in the DNA of our organization is that storytelling is indispensable to social change. Even this revolutionary health sort of experiment is about telling stories. So we believe that that's the core of our work. And Monty and our partner, Brave Soul Collective, just did this amazing event of monologues and narratives and storytelling that really, I think, captured our experiences. And, and most importantly, highlighted the human dignity of Black women. I think so often in narratives, particularly in public health, we're robbed of our humanity. We're robbed of our human dignity.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that what's powerful about our stories is when we're able to restore that, in a sense, to lead with that, to amplify. I mean, I think the ultimate narrative to be countered, I think in many ways, is to, again, just to highlight our humanity. Because I think that the dominant narratives about Black women are often in, statistics.
Yeah, it's just about telling our stories all the time. Like, we're steeped in oral tradition.
Yeah.
So however we can tell our stories and get our stories out there, whether it be YouTube, social media, pen and paper, printing on, the Feminist Wire, the Root.com, NBC News, all these kind of online journals or even paper publications. I think whatever way we can get our stories out there, because if we don't tell our stories, someone else is going to.
Speaking of stories, I have one more. I have some gossip.
Okay.
I'm not going to name any names, but apparently there was someone in the news that wanted to write a story about the DL. Like today, was trying to get people to talk to them about a story about the DL. And I was like,
did I talk to you about this?
No, you didn't.
No, because someone hit me up.
They got to you too?
Well, no. I think they changed it because they said they wanted to talk about HIV in Atlanta, PrEP, and the DL.
Jeez.
And I responded back to them. I said, well, let's talk about HIV in the community and we can talk about PrEP. I said, but the DL, didn't we squash that? And since the rates among women predominantly are going down or plateaued, there's not really a conversation
Why
that
isn't
we
that
had
one
about that.
still a
I don't
thing?
know why
Why
people are
is it-
still talking about
Can
the
you explain?
download.
Maybe do y'all know why is the DL still a thing? Like I thought it was already. I thought you and Keith Boykin and them debunked it. Like,
Yeah, Greg Millett
Greg
did.
Millett.
Greg Millett did a ton of work on that. Keith Boykin wrote an amazing book, debunking the download myth.
You want to let it to Oprah?
I wrote a letter to Oprah.
We should resurrect that. We need to resurrect
We
that.
should. I also wrote a letter, but that didn't get printed. Well, this wasn't, but it was.
What was
It was
that?
an
What was
essay.
in that letter?
It was an essay called "The Black Dick as Weapon of Mass Destruction,"
And the Bush years.
and it was about the Bush years, and it was about the whole
Wow.
down low narrative and about these weapons of mass
Was there a
destruction.
particular dick, or was it like?
It was just all dicks.
Okay, weapons of mass destruction. Okay, I feel you.
One day, maybe next time when we're on
Did it
Revolutionary Health, we can start off with reading that. It's a narrative.
So that's what Saddam was hiding. In
Absolutely, he was hiding.
Iraq. That's why we went to
black
war.
dicks.
Like
He was hiding black dick.
We had to go to war. I think it's time to go.
I think
All right, y'all. Thank you for joining us. I think we need to start doing a disclaimer that this is we're not safe for work. All right, everyone. Thank you for joining us, and until Tuesday.
Thanks, you guys.
All right, take care.
Bye.